Hello and welcome to the third part of our 7 Layers of Security mini-series on Grey Matter Talks Tech, our podcast for dev and IT enthusiasts looking for insights on all things tech. I'm your host for today's third episode, Scott Harrison, and I'll be giving a high-level breakdown on network security. What is network security? We'll start with the fundamentals. It's network perimeter security and where the firewalls fit in. Think of your network like a physical building. You have entrances, you have exits, and you have valuable assets inside. And you need to control who or what can come in and also go out. Network perimeter security is all about establishing and defending that boundary between your internal trusted network and the external untrusted world, primarily the internet. The perimeter is that critical junction point where your network meets the outside world. It's where your office network connects to the internet, to your internet service provider, and it's where your data center connects to the cloud as well. It's where remote employees VPN into your corporate resources, and every one of those connection points is a potential entry point for a threat, and everyone needs to be defended. So what is a firewall? At its core, a firewall is a network security device, or even software, that monitors and controls incoming and outgoing network traffic based on predetermined security rules. Think of it as like a security checkpoint or a bouncer at a club. The firewall sits at the perimeter of the network and then says, does this traffic meet my security policy? If yes, come in, you're allowed. But if no, sorry, you're not coming in, you've got the wrong shoes. But let's look deeper at that, because firewalls have evolved dramatically over the years. Traditionally, we used to call a firewall, or a standard firewall, packet filtering. They were the first generation. They operate at the network layer, and they make decisions based on basic criteria. What was the source IP address? What was the destination IP address? What are the port numbers and the protocols? It's like the bouncer scenario. They're checking IDs. Very basic information. Are you trying to access our web server on port 80? Are you trying to connect to a database server from the internet on a certain port? Blocked, especially if it's 3306. They're fast and efficient, but they're not intelligent. They don't understand the content of the traffic. All they're doing is addressing the information. In the middle ground, we have stateful inspection firewalls. They're smarter because they keep track of the state of network connections. They understand the context of traffic flows. For example, if someone is inside your network initiating a connection to a website, the firewall will remember that and allows the return traffic. But if that's unsolicited traffic and that tries to come in from the outside world without a corresponding internal request, it'll get blocked. That's more like a bouncer who remembers who went upstairs in the club and only lets back those specific people back down rather than just checking IDs and checking them independently each time. At the more modern end now, we have next generation firewalls. They represent the current state of the art, and they go way beyond just IP addresses and ports. They do a lot more by performing something called deep packet inspection, examining the actual content and context of the traffic, and they can identify very specific applications, not just, this is web traffic on port 60, but this is Facebook, this is Dropbox, this is BitTorrent. Next generation firewalls do integrate multiple security functions into one device. Application awareness and control is identifying and controlling specific applications, regardless of where they've come from and what protocol that they're using. Intrusion prevention systems detect and block known attack patterns and exploits, things like DDoS attacks. And SSL socket layer and traffic layer system inspection that will decrypt encrypted traffic, look at every single detail to identify a threat, and then re-encrypt it. Advanced threat protection will allow you to use intelligence and threat intelligence to identify any connections used to any malicious IPs or web addresses or malicious domains. You can also pair this with perimeter security and integrate user identity. Make the security decisions based not just on IP addresses, but who the user is. URL filtering blocks access to malicious or inappropriate websites. It's like having a highly trained security team that not only checks the IDs, but they also understand what people are carrying. It knows the reputation of everybody trying to enter, and they can identify suspicious behavior patterns and makes intelligence decisions based on all of that information. There's also web application firewalls, or WAF for short, which specifically protects any web applications by filtering and monitoring all the HTTP or HTTPS traffic. And they defend against attacks like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and other web-based threats. If you're running a web server or APIs or even software as a service platforms, a web application firewall will add a critical layer of protection that network firewall alone cannot provide. But why do you need it? And why they're absolutely essential? What are we protecting against, and what happens if you don't have proper firewall protection? First, let's understand the threat landscape. Your network is under constant attack, and I'm not being dramatic. It's the reality of being connected to the internet in 2025. Automated scanning tools will continuously probe every IP address on the internet looking for vulnerabilities. Things like botnets try millions of login attempts, and attackers are searching for exposed services, misconfigured systems, unpatched vulnerabilities, and open remote desktop system ports or remote access ports. If you connect a server directly to the internet without a firewall, you'll see an attack attempt within minutes. Not hours, not days, and minutes. Port scans, brute force login attempts, exploit attempts against common vulnerabilities. The internet, shouldn't surprise you I'm saying this, is not a safe place. And a firewall is what keeps the chaos outside, and it allows legitimate processes and business traffic through. We'll walk you through some examples of threats that firewalls protect against. Unauthorized access attempts are constantly happening. Attackers trying to connect to services that should only be internal. Things like your database servers, your file shares, or even admin interfaces. A properly configured firewall will block these attempts entirely. And without a firewall, if you have a database service with a weak password, listening onto the internet, it's just a matter of time before it might be compromised. Malware and ransomware often need to communicate with something called the command and control server that's operated by an attacker or a cybercriminal. They need to download additional malicious payloads to exfiltrate stolen data, or even receive instructions. Next generation firewalls with intrusion prevention and threat intelligence will help identify and block their communication, preventing the malware from even functioning if it gets onto a device. Great example of this is when WannaCry ransomware was spread globally in 2017. One of its behaviors was connecting to a specific domain, and a firewall with updated threat intelligence could have blocked those connections, preventing the ransomware from fully activating even on the infected machines. Another terminology we use when it comes to firewall threats is DDoS, or denial of service attacks, in an attempt to overwhelm your network or services with a massive amount of traffic, making them unavailable to legitimate users. Firewalls can detect and mitigate any DDoS attacks by identifying traffic patterns and looking at what's consistent with any attacks, like millions and millions of requests from the same source or flood attacks, and blocking them before they can consume the resources. Data exfiltration happens when attackers steal your data and firewalls with data loss prevention capabilities can also monitor outbound traffic and block any of those suspicious patterns. Like an internal computer suddenly uploading gigabytes of data to an external server at 3 a.m, or sensitive documents being sent to an unauthorized cloud storage service. Network reconnaissance is how attackers gather information about your network before they even launch an attack. They'll look at everything. They'll scan ports, identify your running services, and actually map your infrastructure. A firewall that will detect and block these scanning attempts and make your network much harder to profile and to attack. A lateral movement will occur potentially after the network gains the initial access, and they try to move from the compromised system to another system, escalating admin privileges and expanding the foothold even further. Any internal firewalls that can segment your network can contain those breaches, and they'll prevent that lateral movement. An attacker who might compromise a workstation in your marketing department hits a wall when they're trying to access the next department along, which could be a financial system, in a completely different network segment. A real-world consequence or real-world consequences of when firewall failed or there was a misconfiguration. In 2013, the American supermarket chain Target had a breach that exposed 40 million credit card numbers and started with compromised credentials. Those attackers continued to use those credentials to access Target's network and then move laterally from point-of-sale systems and right through to warehouses and every other system you could think of. Proper network segmentation with firewalls in between a third-party vendor, which is where this came from, that had access to the corporate network, and payment systems would have prevented that breach. Healthcare organizations are also frequently targeted because of the value of medical records. Hospitals have been hit with ransomware that encrypted patient data and disrupted operations, and in many cases, most of these attacked and succeeded because of medical devices and hospital systems that weren't properly segmented from the general networks, and they weren't configured to prevent unauthorized access to critical systems. Beyond preventing attacks, firewalls provide critical business benefits. Regulatory compliance is one, where you might need network security controls for things like HIPAA or PCI DSS for payment cards, and GDPR for data privacy. They all have requirements around network security and access controls. Making sure you've got them properly configured, it'll help you meet those obligations and avoid any hefty fines as well. Business continuity depends on keeping your network and systems available. All those things we've talked about, DDoS attacks, malware outbreaks, and other network-based threats can shut down operations. Firewalls are your first line of defense in maintaining your uptime. It'll also protect your intellectual property. That is crucial for a competitive advantage, whether it's product designs, customer lists, strategic plans, or proprietary algorithms. Firewalls will help prevent that data theft and block any unauthorized outbound connections and monitoring for any suspicious data transfers. Network visibility and control are really essential for managing a modern network. Good firewalls will actually provide you a detailed log and reporting, and they'll show you what the traffic is going, where it's going, who it's going through, and what applications are being used, and finding those potential security issues before they even exist. This visibility is really invaluable for troubleshooting and can have additional benefits like capacity planning and enhance your security monitoring even further. The bottom line is, connecting to the internet without a firewall is like leaving your front door open in a high-crime neighbourhood and then putting a sign outside listing every valuable, what room they're in, and what the combination to the safe is as well. It's not a question of if you'll be attacked, but when. Firewalls are the fundamental security control that will make that possible to safely connect to the internet and conduct business while managing your risk to an acceptable level. To give you some examples and get practical, what does a good firewall or effective firewall implementation look like? First example is a basic perimeter firewall for a small business. Let's say you're a small company with 20 employees and just a couple of servers and a business internet connection. You can deploy a next generation firewall between your internet router and your internal network, and your default policy is to deny all unless explicitly allowed in a whitelist. This means nothing gets through unless you specifically say it's allowed to and there's a rule permitting it. Further, enable intrusion prevention to detect and block any attack patterns. You can configure application control to prevent use of unauthorized applications that might introduce a security risk. And obviously, if you can, set up an antivirus scanning on traffic passing through the firewall to catch any malware before it enters your network. The basic setup will immediately protect you from most internet-based threats, but whilst allowing very legitimate business traffic through into your network. A second example of a deployment for firewall, very relevant for a medium-sized business, is remote access VPN with the firewall integration included. Remote network over the last 5 years has now become the normal. Let's look at how you can configure that and pretty much connect through a VPN tunnel, which encrypts all the traffic between the device or the user's device and your network. But here's where it gets really sophisticated. You don't just give VPN users full network access. You actually implement a role-based access and you integrate that with things like Entra, or if you're still on premise, your Active Directory. Let's split this into categories. So a sales team, VPN users might be able to access your CRM system, ERP system, and file servers, but don't get access to any engineering resources. Your engineering team, they can access development servers and code repositories. They need that, but they don't have access to HR systems. And at the top of the tree, an IT administrator, realistically, they should be able to access everything, but only after an additional multi-factor authentication or another type of verification to let them in. Another thought is third-party contractors. Now, they should only get access to a specific resource related to their project and time limit that access so that it automatically expires. Again, we're going back over this stuff from perimeter, but it's still very relevant. Your firewall will enforce those policies based on the user identity, not just an IP address. It'll also perform a posture assessment, checking that remote devices have an updated antivirus, that they've got the latest patches, and require security software before allowing that connection. You can even implement different access levels based on device compliance. Fully managed company laptops get broader access, while personal devices used for email might only get limited access through a clientless web portal. A third example is firewall monitoring and response for much larger organizations. And you might consider these also to be maybe a 24/7 system as well. You can configure the firewall to send logs to a security information and event management system, otherwise known as SIEM, and you'll then create an alert for suspicious patterns, multiple block connection attempts from the same source that might indicate an attack, unusual outbound connections to foreign countries from internal servers that may indicate a compromise, a large data transfer during off hours might indicate data exfiltration, connections to known command and control servers definitively indicate compromised systems. When the alerts trigger, your security team will investigate, or managed security service provider will also go and start blocking offending IP addresses, isolate any compromised systems, or adjust the firewall rules to prevent similar attacks. You may also review firewall logs regularly for policy optimization. Maybe you discover users are frequently trying to access a legitimate business application that keeps being blocked, so you create an appropriate rule to allow them access. Or if you find allowed rules that are never used and can be removed to simplify your policy, and that will help reduce your attack surface as well. And to conclude, network security and firewalls, all the way from the ground up. They are your most and first most important critical line of defense, sitting at your network perimeter and making intelligent decisions about what traffic to allow and what to block. They've evolved from just a simple packet filter to sophisticated security platforms, and they understand applications and users and the threats. They protect against unauthorized access, malware, data theft, and any host of different threats that your network face every single day. The key is not just having a firewall, but configuring it properly with a deny by default policy, regular updates, and appropriate segmentation. And of course, where you can achieve it, continuous monitoring. Whether you're protecting a small business or an enterprise, firewalls are absolutely non-negotiable. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If you have any questions about what we've discussed so far, pop an email inquiry into info@greymatter.com. And goodbye for now.